The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, dedicated to creating access to financial well-being for local people, businesses, and communities. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte.
Coming up, we look at the written word as restoration as authors Patricia Lee Lewis and Maïlise Farah and Marianne Winters of Safe Passage speak with us about the Storytelling as Healing event at the Northampton Center for the Arts this Thursday, May 28th.
But first, another book of a different sort that puts a large bit of perspective on a large portion of American history that's often overlooked or generalized, as we check out the new work from Hazel Newlevant.
Queer and How We Got Here is an ambitious and hefty new graphic novel that pairs the author's own queer, non-binary journey with key points and figures in queer history. The book is honest and vulnerable, describing moments of insecurity and uncertainty, reinforcing a core message that one's personal identity and cultural norms around them are often a continuum of trying on and letting go of things, which is inspiring and deeply relatable. And on Sunday, May 31st, Hazel Newlevant will be at Comics and More in East Hampton for a Making of the Book talk and signing at 4 p.m. And they join us now. Thank you so much for joining us, Hazel.
Thank you for having me. What a great intro. Enough said.
Well, it's hard to encapsulate what this book does because it covers so much ground. And it really is it's so neat because it's memoir couched in historical example and in some cases kind of mythological examples. So we're going to start way at the beginning. How did you get started writing comics?
Ooh, well, I always loved painting and drawing growing up. When I was young, I thought I'm definitely going to be a painter, but then I took a comics workshop as a teenager and I just loved, I loved the challenge. I loved combining all of these elements of writing, design, drawing, lettering. When my painting practice was more like doing a very accurate copy of a photo, it was blowing my mind. All the possibilities of comics. Reading that first Scott McCloud, reading the first Alison Bechdel, that really drew me in. And then I went to SVA because they had the cartooning degree, and the rest is history. So I kind of have come up with stories and what I want to write about primarily from a desire to have something to draw, because that was my first love. Most of my work is either autobiographical or history. So when my editor of this book said, "Can you pitch me something that is queer history with some personal elements?" I said, "Yes, that is so entirely up my alley." So then I worked on this book for about 5 years.
That's so long, but also this book is 300 pages, so it makes sense that it took so long. Also, congratulations that you finished, because that should be celebrated as well.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Originally I said I'm gonna write this in 1 year and draw it in another year, and that was absolutely not the case, because once I started diving into the research, I always wanted to go deeper than what that schedule would have allowed. I really wanted to draw in elements that even somebody who's pretty familiar with US queer and trans history would not be aware of, just by trying to read really widely.
To that end, your bibliography is
This had to go too deep.
is extensive on this book. It is, I think, 14 pages long. Your bibliography, it's something close to that.
It could have been longer. I had to have, of course, a spreadsheet keeping track of all my citations for my own self, a line for every factual assertion in this whole book. So that's about 2,000 lines long, something like that.
Whoa.
But what my publisher told me is, we just want to include citations for the quotes, which is not a bibliographic practice that I was familiar with. But I said, okay, here's the citations for the quotes. And then I pushed the boundaries a little bit. I said, every protest sign that I have lovingly reproduced is a quote
Yeah.
if you think about it. Just because it's not in my little lettering font doesn't mean it's not a quote. And every lovingly reproduced newspaper, book cover, when they said it just had to be quotes, I really expanded the idea of what a quote was to make them include as much of the context as possible, because I want people to be able to go to the sources that I used to see what's there as much as possible. And even if they're just flipping through it, to just feel the gravity that this all comes from somewhere.
We're speaking with Hazel New Levant, who will be at Comics and More in East Hampton celebrating the release of their latest book, Queer and How We Got Here. Speaking of those sources, can you talk a little bit about how important publications of various types, like magazine culture and journal culture, is integral to the queer movement from mid-19th century honestly through now? Part of something that you touch on in your book is like basically the origins of The Advocate. And like it is a publication that is known today as being like an important part of queer culture, but that's not exactly how it started. So can you talk about like magazines and journals writ large and how important they are to queer history in America?
I totally agree with their centrality. So I'm glad you brought that in. And also, I have a soft spot for print culture. Like, I think I must have a bias towards it as an author myself and a zine maker. I definitely highlight queer print culture and instances where people started their own newsletters and small presses, because it's a very concrete form of action that I can point to. I have a broader theme of like highlighting activist tactics that I think are really interesting or powerful or were fun to draw, which includes something like the Daughters of Bilitis, which was the first lesbian advocacy organization known, I'm pretty sure, in the modern context, started in 55. And when they started their newsletter, The Ladder, like, this was so important for queer women all around the country that created a forum for queer women and for lesbians to be able to talk to each other and see that they weren't alone, even in really remote places. Or even the importance of Stonewall as a cultural watershed moment. The reason that the call of Stonewall was heard across the country and amplified was because there was a network of gay newspapers that would write about this kind of thing. So, before Stonewall, there had been other instances of this similar kind of collective uprising, but the print culture was not there to then extend that, to have a broader reach and contextualize like what this could mean.
Right. When I say that this is sprawling in scope, even though your personal life is ostensibly the framework for telling this story of queerness in America, and you're very clear that that framework is like your specific perspective, was it hard to incorporate other perspectives as part of the shifting queer landscape within this book, especially considering you had so much ground to cover?
So, how did I define the scope?
Yeah.
Well, I started out with a framework of what I would call kind of canon events in my gender and relationship, romantic development. Had kind of a list in mind, and then I thought I'm going to alternate each one of these with some kind of historical topic that will contextualize this in my life. And the framing of how it affects me is specific and limiting. Like, I'm a white person of English descent who's always lived in the US. So as far as trying to trace the influence on my life, it is very US focused or North American focused, with elements of like 19th century European intellectual developments. Yeah, I wanted to be specific about that within the book because it's not everything. There's so much to be said about queerness and transness and non-binary gender expressions around the world that I don't really delve into. Like, I don't get into too much detail about third genders and non-binary genders around the world, even though there's so much to be said there. But then I did include some pretty, I don't know, different directions, or the scope was pretty wide ranging just by virtue of trying to pair each little canon event in my life with some kind of history. Like, I pair my youthful slutty period with the history of birth control going back to like the 18th century.
Yeah.
And the birth control movement, and then the sexual revolution in the 60s. That's one of the longest sections, which goes the furthest back, but I thought it was really exciting to ground everything in how even norms of different sex couples having sex, and like when that's
Like the
appropriate,
the politics of those actions are not necessarily any part of your sexuality. They're just part of being a couple, which is, I think, that like pops up with that section for sure. And then like how that dynamics when any one of the non quote unquote, well, like whichever, no, now we're getting into the power dynamics part of it. That is also a large part of your book too, which,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
I tried to foreground whenever I could how economic and material dynamics shape gender relations.
yeah,
Basically because it's not gender essentialist, so I
right.
find that, intellectually very attractive, but also I think it's really illuminating.
Yeah.
Something about how like the concept of separate spheres and women's natural role being in the domestic sphere is like a product of industrialization as opposed to having like home farm labor.
Right, right. More coming up with author illustrator Hazel Newlevant as we explore their color scheme, the balance of advocacy and control, and the real-time changes in history they had to include in their new book, Queer and How We Got Here, for which they'll be in East Hampton at Comics and More on May 31st.
After which, we'll discover ways that writing can help process traumatic events and situations as we talk about the Storytelling as Healing event at the Northampton Center for the Arts this Thursday.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM. We're speaking with Hazel Newlevant, whose new book, Queer and How We Got Here, is being celebrated at Comics and More in East Hampton on Sunday, May 31st, with an author appearance. You can go and have them sign your book and ask your own questions. But mine is, did you know about the extensive history of hormone therapy before researching it for this book? Because I had no idea it went back quite so far. It's one of the more fascinating things I found in your book.
Oh, thank you. No, I did not. That was one of the sections that I came to know and came to research out of necessity rather than already being familiar with it. But
Right.
I got to historicize the concept of testosterone and taking testosterone, which go to the history of endocrinology, like the entire discovery that hormones are a thing, and then the process of trying to create hormonal medications, which were at first it had to come from natural sources like the urine of mares, the urine of pregnant women, which they got from maternity homes.
Right.
But so these things could not really be deployed as medications at scale until they figured out how to synthesize them from other natural sources, stuff like yams.
Which is super fascinating.
Yeah, they found a particular kind of Mexican yam, which I believe is the source of estrogen. That is the material context for people having this option to change their sex characteristics or amplify, because there's a lot of cisgender hormone taking. Like
Even of testosterone
I,
itself.
yeah, I was a little not mind blown, but it certainly stood out to me when it's called the same thing. HRT, hormone replacement therapy, is the same name whether you're trans and taking hormones or whether you're a cis woman taking hormones because you have gone through menopause. Or just to de-exceptionalize taking these hormones and to point out how accessible they are for cis people, present in birth control pills, which are just such a widely used medication. But being able to synthesize these hormones and have this be a medication is like a material basis for modern experience of transsexuality, basically. And as soon as this was an extant medication, there was a lot of people contacting doctors because they wanted to take cross-sex hormones. And then the whole diagnostic framework for transsexuality kind of came out of that.
There's this interesting triumvirate between advocacy, power, and control in all of the moments that are brought up in your book and also kind of in your life. This is an examination of that advocacy and that power and that control with regards to the queer and trans communities throughout American history. Did examining that change how you view it in your own life and how you interact with it in your own life?
Ooh, that's such a smarty pants question.
I'm sorry.
I love it.
They're like, oh yeah, we're gonna check for this.
I do have the power and control wheel as a feature in my book,
right?
Which is an articulation of that comes out of the battered women's movement and women's shelters. It's basically an articulation of a brainstorm of different aspects of abusive relationships,
right.
Beyond physical violence, of controlling tactics. So that was one of the aspects of my life that is historicized in this book, is an abusive relationship and leaving that abusive relationship, which it was not something that I initially was sure. Like, I was like, how do I historicize the concept of an abusive relationship? But it turns out there was something called the battered women's movement,
yes.
And they were really heroic, in my opinion, and helped change the discourse on what is even acceptable in relationships. I find it freeing to consider how the entire framework of gender and sexuality has morphed so much over time, how much these things are not universal constants. The more that I interact with that, then the less pressure I feel to like categorize myself correctly. The more that I think, well, at some point, all of us would have just been called inverts, and who knows what we're going to be called tomorrow. It was very painful to write as some of the hard-won freedoms and opportunities that I have enjoyed in my own life have been attacked or rolled back. It was a sad day when I had to change Roe versus Wade is a crowning achievement of the second wave feminist movement to Roe versus Wade was. And there were some other instances like that where I had to add these very sad addendums as things were brought up to the present day, but just remains essential to try and understand how these victories were formed in the first place, because we can't necessarily run the same playbook again, but that was inspiring to me as I was doing my research, is just trying to understand how these things were socially contested.
We're speaking with Hazel New-Levant, who will be at Comics and More in East Hampton celebrating the release of their latest book, Queer and How We Got Here. I wanted to ask about your color scheme in this book, because the way that the colors shift between topics is, I thought, really interesting.
Oh, yeah. So it was really inspired by risograph printing and risograph comics, which risograph printing, it's like a copier, but instead of doing just black ink or CMYK, you can have specially colored inks. Like, I've definitely seen Risograph comics with a similar palette to this, like have a bright pink ink and a dark blue, something like that. And that is a formal limitation that I had been interested in trying to make work with this type of limited palette for a long time. And the book actually has Pantone inks, which are like, instead of being a blend of the CMYK to get specific colors, like the ink just is bright orange. So it's with this it's printed with this palette of the 3 Pantone inks: dark blue, bright orange, and bright pink. And pink and blue is anything autobiographical, and orange and blue is anything historical. Chose the colors because I did have bright pink hair at the time, so that was a basis for the character design. And of course, pink and blue, it's the classic gender colors. And then I thought orange and blue looks a little bit 70s.
It makes it look a little sepia toned at times, which makes it kind of look
totally.
like further
The
back
light
in time.
Orange.
Yeah. So you've also done work as an editor for a couple of compilations. Did that work help you get this to be as holistic as this volume is?
Thanks. That's a good question. So I've edited various anthologies. I edited one of stories about abortion. I edited up stories about gaming. It was all by women cartoonists at the time. Now a lot of us have changed our gender, but this was 2014, so different time. And for these anthologies, it was a process of reaching out to different artists and creators, and wanting to draw a bunch of different people in with different perspectives on a singular-ish subject or topic, to just hit it from a bunch of different perspectives and encompass it better than one person could do. So there's a similarity with Queer and How We Got Here in terms of a mental arrangement of little chapters and little sections that are ordered in a certain way to try and build to a certain narrative and thematic whole. But other than that, it's not so much like editing. I mean, I edit my own work in the sense of whatever heuristics that I would apply to analyzing somebody else's work. Like, principally, is it readable? Is the storytelling clear and understandable? That's like the main thing that I edit for. And then it's because artistic success is in the eye of the beholder, so I try and have a lighter touch about things that are more just style judgments, and not come in like, how would I draw this as a cartoonist myself? But so I apply the same analysis to my own work. I kind of pre-edit it for the editors that I'm working with.
Queer and How We Get Here is the latest book by comic author and sometimes editor Hazel New Levant, who will be at Comics and More in East Hampton on Sunday, May 31st. Thank you so much for spending so much time with me. This was a hefty tome, and it was a really fun read.
Thank you so much for having me and for all your great questions. And yeah, I hope the listeners pick it up so they can see what they think, and maybe come by Comics and More, ask your own questions. Yeah. And there's a slideshow. So
there's a slideshow.
Yeah, I have to have some element that is exclusive to reward people for actually showing up.
Okay, noted.
The event at Comics and More in East Hampton with Hazel New Levant begins at 4 on Sunday, May 31st, with a lot of bells and whistles for the folks that got to make it a unique experience. So check out Comics and More's Instagram page for more info on the event itself.
Up next, the storytellers from the upcoming event Storytelling as Healing at 33 Holly, happening this Thursday, May 28th.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM. Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. This Thursday, May 28th at the Northampton Center for the Arts, it's a benefit for Safe Passage called Storytelling as Healing.
An evening of readings, connection, healing with author Patricia Lee Lewis, voice actor Judith Fine, and poet advocate Maidalise Vera. You'll hear a reading from Patricia's debut novel, Thorn of the Mesquite, with voice actor Judith Fine.
We'll also hear from special guest Maidalise Vera, a.k.a. Guerrera writer and a poet and advocate who knows firsthand how writing can be an incredible outlet for healing. Together, the audience will explore how storytelling can be a powerful tool for moving through domestic violence and reclaiming your voice. And with that, we'll say that there is a content warning with what we'll be talking about, some very heavy topics with our two guests today, Maidalise Vera, Dali, and Patricia Lee Lewis, who joins us again. You were one of our very early guests, Patricia Lee Lewis, after the passing of Representative John Olver, who you worked for quite some time, back when we were, NEPM was still on Main Street in Springfield. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much.
Oh, no, our pleasure.
You have a new novel out that came out in the fall that Khalees and I both read. That is your first novel.
Right.
Yes. And I will say, for the benefit of those listening at home, you are not a spring chicken, let's say. But the book is called Thorns of the Mesquite, and it takes place in Texas, which is where you are originally from. And it is a novel, and it deals with both domestic violence and racial violence and overcoming that violence with a lot of hope and healing. Talk about what inspired you to write this novel at this stage of your career.
Well, excuse me. For many years, I led workshops and retreats with writers, creative writers, and during every writing session, I wrote also. And I gave so many prompts that I got where I could pretend like if I gave the prompt, I didn't remember it, and then I played like somebody else gave it, and then I could write from it without any expectation. And so I was leading a retreat in Ireland. It was 2010, I think, and I must have given a prompt that said something like, imagine, because I always tried to get people out of their thinking mind and into feeling and memory and sort of the deeper self images. Imagine in yourself that someone is walking ahead of you on some kind of a road, and begin with the first word that comes to you. And the first paragraph of my book is what came to me. It had no plot. I didn't even know who Donna was. And for real, as a character, I knew that I had a great aunt named Donna who had lived on a ranch, which I got to know well as a child. But I didn't know Aunt Donna. I was only 4 or 5 when I remember her. But she became the main character of this book and drives it, you might say. But the issues in the book are ones that are familiar to me in my life. Domestic violence being one of those, and hardly anybody I know that isn't familiar with that firsthand, one way or the other. But also racism, being from Texas. And I was from a family that were integrationists very early on. We had a cross burned in our lawn in Austin, Texas. In, I don't know what, that 1956, something like that. And so early on, we got to be activists as best we could down there. So those issues are kind of in me, the way the story goes and the good things that happen and that Donna does and causes others to do and that others get together to do. And where there's some transformation and someone's like consciousness raising, those are really aspirational. I wish I were like that. It's not an autobiographical book. I'm familiar with it, all of it. Or you can't write if you're not, right? But it is. I am not Donna, despite what my family thinks.
Well, you can imagine the bravery that Donna shows. And I'll read the synopsis of the book for those who aren't familiar with it. Patricia Lee Lewis's brand new book. Donna Lee Rose Willis's life on a vast West Texas ranch in 1938 is shaped by hard work, a starkly beautiful landscape, and a loveless marriage. Everything shifts when her orphaned niece Anna Lou arrives, and Samuel Washington, a black man, seeks refuge from a lynch mob, thrusting Donna into a dangerous fight against brutal prejudices. A powerful and timely tale of historic fiction, Thorn of the Mesquite paints a stirring portrait of a woman's awakening of love and the resilient spirit demanded to fight for what's right against staggering odds. And that is the synopsis of the book by Patricia Lee Lewis, who will be in conversation about this book as an event called Storytelling as Healing at 33 Holly, a benefit for Safe Passage, which helps women and their families navigate through domestic violence. And that event is this Thursday, May 28th.
Might at least, like, you don't, like, I've read your poetry because that's what I was given. And I, like, in writing, have always found poetry to do exactly what this event is doing. It has always been a way to process. So, like, what appealed to you about poetry itself as opposed to narrative? Because both are really good for exploring this, but they don't work in entirely the same way.
Absolutely. I think that for me, I had the opportunity to actually go to an event the year prior where there was a lot of poetry being shared. So the Survivor Anthology had been published a year prior, and a group of women had invited me, particularly a poet named Christine Dutton. And I was able to hear her poetry, and I was inspired by her to sort of write my story in poetry form. It does allow the writer to have enough distance, I think, from a story that can re-traumatize you, really, with the thought of it, right? And so in poetry form, it almost allows you to sing the song differently, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It sure does. And I would say, I mean, it must be hard to process all of these things as a human being, but then to rethink them through the poetry. Talk about the anthology that you've got before you, and some of the other. Do you know any of the other authors that are a part of it, and have you connected with them in the healing process of writing?
Absolutely. So the Survivor Anthology is put forth by Safe Passage, and it's a group of incredible sort of creatives and social workers that have come together to do this sort of out of their own will. And I learned about it after it was I was published, I think, 1 or 2 seasons. So I believe this is the third, the 2025 version. That being said, once you are part of the anthology, you're part of a family. And so what happens is that not only do you meet other writers, but you meet other people that are able to sit with you. Sometimes I think it could be difficult to be able to just sit with a really difficult story with other people. And when you're surrounded by people that work with, for, are around Safe Passage, you're surrounded by people that really do care about that story that you are either wanting to share or too scared to sort of publicly face. And so there's something about just being in community that this anthology allows us to just share space with others that have gone through something similar and that really deeply do understand, and that's special.
Being a part of that community and having that group of folks who are also writing about similar experiences allow you to shift your own language of how you write about your experience, like how you engage with your experience on the page?
I think yes and no. I think that you see other people do something that you've maybe wanted to do, something that like feels really difficult, and you see the power that they generate and how I was kind of excited to be like, no, like I have to say this out loud. And then you think, like, how many more people can I inspire to be able to write their story and share their story, and to be able to like be part of a community that otherwise, when you think about domestic violence, you think about like the silence behind it and how it can be shameful and how some people don't speak about it. But this allows us to have a safe space, a safe community, and then also to be able to write it in the way that that we desire, whether that be poetry or narrative. It just happened to pour out of me in poetry form.
Cool. That's Maidalise Vera, who is part of the Storytelling as Healing event that'll take place at the Northampton Center for the Arts this Thursday. We're also speaking with Patricia Lee Lewis, whose book is called Thorns of the Mesquite. And in that book, there are women who inspire each other to stand up and be more brave. So I'm wondering if that has been your experience. You mentioned that it's not autobiography, that you were not necessarily yourself as brave as your heroine in the book, but have there been inspiring women to you who have given you that courage to step forward and write your truth in that way?
Well, I'll start by saying that when I learned what feminist meant, I became one. And that was a long time ago, and became really active in the early women's movement. And it was that community. It was that shared experience that we had, and the times of the aha moments that we helped each other have that became ways of beginning to look at your life differently. And maybe you could stand up for yourself differently. That it was sort of, I don't think I could have I wouldn't have known to write how the community of women could make such a difference in West Texas in 1938 on ranch land, had I not had that experience. And there's a man even in a character, a really powerful character in the book, a judge, who changes his way of seeing the world by being in conversation with the main character and finding his story where he had been terribly damaged and finally told that story and was accepted in her amazing way, and began to see how his behavior had affected people. Some reviewers have said that could never happen. I know it does because of my experience in the women's movement. Mm-hmm. I saw whole different worlds begin to appear by way of possibility for myself in the process that we had in what were called consciousness raising groups, and support groups and so on. So yes, I have experienced in my own writing. I mean, I've led hundreds of writing workshops and retreats. And for me, the whole thing is about community. Absolutely. It's writing with others. And in our method that I learned years ago at the knee of Pat Schneider, who started Amherst Writers and Artists in 1985, I think it was, I met her. We would write in groups. We generated new work right in the circle. And then we had a chance to read it and really listen for what was working, what we liked about it, what stayed with us. Never did we respond with what wasn't working, but only with what was strong. And the amazing power of that to keep writing, keep doing anything, was enormous for me and a lot of other people. And so I kept that up with my own work, and it was always in groups. And we started Straw Dog Writers Guild, 15 years ago, out of that kind of community to help further community. We were talking about that earlier. I was with Dolly, and just the importance of having other people who put themselves on the line, So, yes, it's very much the power of women, but power of any people who care about others, that reaching out to help other people. It's better in community because you do really, you gain strength from each other. I think you do, as we say often, courage is contagious. It is. I remember that against the war in Vietnam, when we were considered, non-patriotic people. But it was really being able to speak out and find others who had the same way of wanting to find peace, to find community, that we got through that. That's central, at least for me. I think it is from the way you're nodding that it is for you too.
We agree.
Nodding on the radio.
Yes.
Nodding on
It's
the
very
radio.
descriptive.
Well, let's take a quick little break here, and we'll come back and have more conversation with Patricia Lee Lewis and Maidalise Bera about storytelling as healing, an event that's happening at the Northampton Center for the Arts this Thursday.
And maybe hear a little bit of their work, too. You're listening to The Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
A lot of Sonny Rollins today. Rest in peace, and welcome back to the Fabulous 413. We're here with writers Patricia Lee Lewis and Maidalise Bera, who are both part of an event this Thursday, May 28th, at the Northampton Center for the Arts, a benefit for Safe Passage called Storytelling is Healing. And before we run out of time, we want to hear some of their work. We're not going to read the whole Thorn of the Mesquite book, but Judith Fine,
It is
formerly
300
of
pages.
Gazebo, is going to be doing the audiobook version of it and will be there as part of the event on Thursday. But Dolly, let's start out with one of your poems.
Of course. I'm going to be reading The House. This was published in the Survival and Beyond anthology, summer of 2025. So here goes. The House. I don't remember when the front window cracked. Maybe it was his cavernous voice. I don't remember when the walls turned yellow and the floors a vicious gray. Maybe it happened when I was sleeping or writing. Maybe it was the way that he saw the color cherry in endless flames. I don't remember when the bathroom door handle became flimsy and unreliable. Slippery slope. Maybe it was when I asked him to move in. His body sweaty, heavy, ready to take. The house had fought back and lost. I do remember the first hole in the wall, next to the back door, and the continuous broken TV in the green bin, not the blue. I'll fix it, he sang in cuckoo clock. Turns out the hole is now colored gunmetal gray, but the crater lives there still. The second series in the form of broken portals. In his rage, there were cracked doors, every door ruptured. Every rupture, scary stories with endless chapters. The bangs were loud, heavy-footed. Boom, boom, boom. Up, up, up. Choky, choky, choky. Boom, boom, boom. Down, down, down. Silence. The flood came after. There was water everywhere. The house was drowning. A green pump in our local hardware store, and the house didn't even say thank you. The house didn't speak. The man didn't speak. 3 times in a span of 2 months. Doubting my efforts. Was I doing enough to survive? Flipped over a few times as the house regurgitated its last effort of trying to breathe. Crouched down to cry in a corner. In delusion, I begged for my mother. I began to see the house as mother. It wasn't the house I had bought with the polished, lustrous new house smell. There was no fancy rainfall nozzle, beyond fractured because it wasn't healing. No amount of plaster or drywall could hide what the house had become. The realtor's eyes were not shocked to see the infrastructure falling apart. She lived it herself. She gave me a laundry list of remedies, but none better than remain no contact, tell your mom, and give this house a paint job. Thank you.
Super powerful stuff from
Thank you so
an
much.
anthology that benefits a Safe Passage and a collection of poems like these, and that was poet Dali Bera, a.k.a. Guerrera writer, who will be part of Storytelling is Healing on Thursday. Patricia Lee Lewis, do you have something you'd like to share with us before the end of the show?
I do.
Please.
Go for it.
Yes.
Excuse me. So this poem is written, I guess you would say, from the point of view or close third of a 16-year-old pregnant person who's married. It's called The Fist, so it fits. Sheetrock splatters, edges. God damn you, girl, he yells. The floor is cool. See how it shines? Today she waxed, the new kind, liquid, under bed and dresser. Under bed, crawl under bed. It has clean sheets, the new kind. Corners fitted, pastel peach and peaches just today, hill country peaches, white and juicy, bruising easily, no peeling, washing only, gently peaches under water, smooth fuzz from stem. Her mother slices to the pit again, and white half moons fall heaped and sweating. Get out from under there, you bitch, and get my dinner. Chicken, fried with good cream gravy, biscuits like her grands, and sweet canned peas. Where's my dinner? Cobbler, thick peach cobbler, backyard ice cream, made by hand, her daddy laughing, turning while the ice and salt drip onto grass. Come take a turn, you're getting strong enough. Her mama fixing dinner, her daddy home. Good job, go help your mother. Setting plates and forks for 6. The blessing, holding hands. Get out of there, you bitch. I'll pull you by your ugly hair. Fuck the baby, you pregnant whore.
Remember not to swear. We're on the radio.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Luckily, we have a dump button.
The screen door slams. June bugs hang on with legs like jagged bolts. Outside, the air is cool against her arms. She's done the dishes and can play a while. She leans against the live oak tree and dreams of getting big and getting married, making ice cream in the dark, her kids, and all the blessings.
It's ironic that the thing that people would
It's
find
always the older
offensive
women.
is that word rather than what that content is about and what
Exactly.
I'm
whomever
sorry,
had to
I
experience.
really forgot that it was even in there.
Oh, well, I mean, we were wrapped up in the moment because it's such a powerful testimony to what you both are talking about and how both of those poems rhyme, sadly, truly, and are perfect.
And resonate with each other.
Really.
Yeah.
Is there, in the minute we've got left, is there something that is powerful or useful to each of you when someone else reads your work, especially out loud?
When someone else reads?
When someone else reads your work out
Wow.
loud. Because, like, at this event, Judith Fine is going to be reading
Yeah.
your novel.
Well, we read it together.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Yes, that's what we've been doing in all the readings. I read the narrative and she reads all the voice, the dialogue.
Nice.
So it's a joint effort, and it's wonderful to do. I love working with her. It's,
What about you, Dolly?
I think there's something about like waking up a piece that you did not write and to read it sort of in your own voice and how you interpret it. I think there's something soulful and different and beautiful about that.
Well, you both are very brave to have created this work in the first place and to come and share it with us here on the radio and then to share it with everyone as well who will be there on Thursday, May 28th at 33 Holly at the Northampton Center for the Arts. It is a benefit for Safe Passage, who once again does incredible work helping women and their families navigate through these horrible issues that you have so beautifully put to poetry and to prose. And thanks for coming in and talking with us about it, Patricia Lee Lewis, whose debut novel is Thorns of the Mesquite, but that was poetry from your Kind of Yellow poetry anthology, and Marilis Vera, a.k.a. Guerrera Ryder, who is part of the anthology that Safe Passage has just put out. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
And do check out the other volumes of that collection because it's ongoing every year. There's a new one that's put out.
Absolutely.
So you get new perspectives, new views on this whole thing, and it's powerful every time.
Thank you both so much for coming in.
Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, it's our pleasure. On the next Fabulous 413, we will have an exploration of the Berkshire International Film Festival.
Plus, we'll explore the evolutions of restaurant phrases with word nerd Emily Brewster, our resident wordster from Merriam-Webster.
Plus, we head up to the hill towns to Fernhill Farm in Buckland. I'm Khalees Smith.
I'm Monty Belmonte. We'll see you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.